Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The American Mystic. This is Denise King Francisco, and today I am so excited to be with a very dear friend of mine, Donna Thompson, who will be co-facilitating this hour with each and every one of you. The chat room is open wherever you happen to be around Grandmother Earth. Whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, please do come on in. The water is always fine here in the chat room. Welcome to the American Mystic, and please, everyone, welcome my special guest, Donna Thompson. Hello, Donna.
Hello, Dana. So good to be here with you.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. This is something that you and I have been talking about, collaborating for quite some time.
Same here. I'm just delighted, as always, to spend time with you and to talk about mystical things.
So, Donna, as we start the show today, would you do a favor for me, please, and let everyone know who you are and where you're located and how people can get in touch with you for your work?
Sure. I'm Donna, and I live in New York State in the United States, down in the New York metro area, just outside of New York City. And if you want to reach out to me, you can reach me through my website, which is Healing Interiors, all one word, healinginteriors.com. You can also follow me on Facebook. My page there is called Collage Quest. And my newest venture is I have a YouTube channel, and it's called Artists and Oracles, all one word. So you can find me there. I talk about tarot and oracle matters and all things artistic related to divination.
I love that. And Donna and I have been good friends for the past, 12 years, 10, 12 years. Donna actually stood up for me when I married Todd in Cornwall, England. And there was a connection that she and I had that, believe it or not, I had not known her closely prior to that, but there was something about Donna and about Donna's energy and presence of being that touched me in a way that I asked her to stand with me there on the cliffs of Cornwall in England to bear witness to Todd and I marrying. And over the years of knowing her, whether or not you're somebody who believes in past lives or kindred spirits, I believe at the very least she and I are kindred spirits. She and I both share ancestors here in the United States who arrived here in the United States before it was the United States. And we come from a long line of farming people, people of the land, and spiritual people, by whatever definition that meant or means to any of you. And so I believe that we collaborate on many levels, and yet we're very different people. And today's talk is about giving voice to who we are and what we are as American mystics. So the first question that I have for my guest is this: Donna, what is an American mystic to you?
Yeah, I so love this topic, this whole concept of being an American mystic. And Dana, you were the first one to introduce me to this. And I remember just being so struck by like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, this is just such a great way to language the work we do as spiritual people. You know, whatever your name for that is. Lots of people like to call themselves light workers, or whatever branch of spirituality you're practicing. But for those of us here in America, it does have a particular flavor, as it does in any place, any country around the globe, right? Where you live, the land you live upon informs who you are and how you work. And as Dana said, for those of us who are people, our literal blood relatives have been here for a very long time, that, yeah, there's like a particular, I don't know what to call it, energy signature for that. But so anyway, to answer your question, bring it back to your question, for me in particular, when I was thinking about this, for me, it's kind of starts, it's a very much a day-to-day practice. So, it starts in the morning, first thing. It starts with me each day being mindful that no matter what's on my schedule for that day, whether it's appointments outside of the house or, various other pieces of work that I do, I wear a lot of hats. And, but, it's got to start in the morning, kind of first thing, like even before you're out of bed, and often that takes the form of, I know I work in the dream time a lot. I'm a big dreamer. I have been since I was a child, since I even understood dreaming. But so I have to make time and space for that, no matter what time the alarm's going to go off. So oftentimes I'm awakened early, middle of the night. I'm up. I switch rooms. All kinds of things, and I have to be sure that if I'm given important guidance in the dream time, I got to catch it. And I have to write it down or at least jot a few notes because that's key. So for me, it's being ever mindful of my dreaming practice. So it kind of starts there. And then another big piece of it is, for me, being a mystic, it's all about remembering that you're co-creating all the time. We get, life is just something these days. It's like what we're doing right now. I'm looking at Dana on my iPhone. We can see each other, which is great. We got you got to do the technology. She's watching the chat room. But beyond that, beyond this very 3D earthly plane, there's this constant kind of co-creation going on. And if you don't breathe and slow down, and stay calm and grounded enough, I speak for myself, but I mean, this is the human condition. If I don't breathe and slow down and stay grounded, I miss all of that. And so that is a day-to-day, moment-to-moment thing that, just remember, like, okay, Missy, whatever you think is going on here, you're co-creating. You're not in charge. You best listen, especially when things go wonky. Like, well, let's tune in here. What's going on? Are your feet on the ground? How's your breath? Is it shallow or can you feel it down in your belly? So that's another big one. And then just in a more broad sense, I mean, to be an American mystic, I think it's quite an eclectic thing because we are a very eclectic people, right? We are the melting pot. That's a huge part of our identity as Americans. This is the great melting pot. And the more we can remember that, particularly these days, the better off we are. And so for me, it's sort of honoring that I come at this whole spiritual world, spiritual practice, my work in a very multifaceted way. I'm interested in a lot of things. I have pursued, studied, practiced multiple things over the last 25, 30 years. And I just need to stay mindful of that and honor that and allow that to be okay. Because people always want to pigeonhole you, right? People want to know, what do you do? Like, I would like to talk about that, later or another time. Like, how do you do when people say, what do you do? How do you answer that? So anyway, there's my long, short answer to your first question, Dana.
I love that answer, that long, short answer. Hey, Carla Joe, welcome to the chat room. It's good to have you in the chat room and with us on the show today. And anyone else, come on into the chat room. We'd love to have you in for this conversation that we are having. I love the fact that you use the word eclectic, because for most of us here in the United States, we are an amalgam. That isn't true for everybody. I do have my friend Kelly Holt, who, when she did her ancestry blood quantum testing stuff, she is 98.9% Norwegian. That's it.
Sound.
I can hear the horn blowing off the Viking ship, right? And so for some people, that is the case. But for many of us, we are an amalgam of those ancestors that came across the big pond, as they say. And we are, in our practice, very eclectic. Did you find in your decades of learning, Donna, that you were drawn to certain streams of study or spiritual practice, only to find out that perhaps those were the same sorts of practices that your ancestors that came here from wherever they came from to this land, that they also practiced?
I did, and it took me a while. But when I finally realized that, a lot of things clicked into place. So I had been kind of dabbling around shamanism for probably nearly a decade, starting around the time I met you, I would imagine. You know, I was drawn to several teachers who were shamans, one of whom still doesn't call herself that, but certainly is to me. But I just was sort of skirting around the edges and thinking like, well, I don't know, I can't claim that for me. And then this whole work with collage started coming into being, and before I knew it, I was writing about it because there were no other books about it. So I just started writing to understand what I was doing. And then before long, I thought, well, I'll just write a book, And as the book came into form, it became really shamanic. And I became really uncomfortable with that, really, really uncomfortable with that. And I was talking to, different people about that. And one day, one person in particular I was talking to, she said something to me, and I just realized, something about your ancestry, if you go back far enough. And this light bulb came on, and I just said, right, because I'm Celtic. I had literally, it never occurred to me, and I was in my 40s already at that time. But I knew who my people were. I knew that on my mother's side, they were all Welsh, and on my father's side, they were Irish and Scottish. But somehow, I just hadn't gotten around to studying what that meant. I was busy doing all kinds of other things. And all of a sudden, I'm sure it was just my people, guidance, finally dropping it in like, okay, she's finally ready, just give it to her. And that was it. And I was like, yeah, I'm Celtic. Though I have a thread in. I was looking for something that was legitimate, because in our time here, there's many people being drawn to spirituality, which is wonderful and beautiful and needed, right? Needed. But then along with that comes all the human egos and finger pointing and who are you and what's your blood and are you Native American and are you and I didn't want to offend anybody, I'm a good Presbyterian girl from way back, I don't want to be stepping on anybody's toes, saying I'm this, I'm that. But when I realized that I was Celtic, I don't need a blood test for it. I still haven't done one. Maybe I will one day, but I know my people are Celtic. I know that. Then I began to turn to that, and that just kept opening doors and continues to open doors for me. So yes.
I love that. The point that you were making about not wanting to offend, I think is so at the forefront for a lot of people here in the United States, and I know abroad. So for those of you that are listening, wherever you happen to be listening, and I know that for some, this idea that we as Americans actually measure our blood quantum, here in the United States, for a variety of reasons, there seems to always be the question, how Irish are you? How Scottish are you? How Native American are you? On and on ad infinitum. And I've often said to people who will say to me, I don't feel that I'm worthy to delve into my Celtic roots because I'm only 5% Irish. The rest of me is German or Native American or what have you. But you know, Dana, I'm really drawn to the 5%. I always say, but you know what, that 5%, those of your ancestors, they lived. They had their way here on Grandmother Earth. And they're no less valuable than the other 95% of the people sitting around your table, as I call it. And so if you're drawn to the 5% or the 2% or the 3% or the 99%, going with the flow of what you know that you are drawn to in your blood and in your bones, because we are informed by our ancestors in our blood and in our bones, is always the way to go. How do you feel about that, Donna?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it's, I think there's a thread that guides all of us, and it's a tug. We feel it in different parts of our body, often in our gut, and it's what has led me often. I just sort of go with what I get interested in, and I dive in. And you get different things from your studies, and then often it'll lead to something else, so you do a deep dive and then you kind of know when it's done. But and I think that is the ancestor speaking to us. The more we tune in, the more we get skilled at our working with all our extra senses, our clairs. That's how we know they're guiding us. Like, hey, this book, check this out. Like for me, when the world shut down in 2020, I had been for several years prior to that, I kept saying, one of these days I'm gonna just really get into tarot and oracle. I'm gonna do a deep dive and I'm gonna study, and it didn't happen. I was doing other things. And as soon as that happened, it's such an odd time, right, for all of us. Like, who's ever lived through anything like that? The world shut down for many, many of us. We took to our homes. And one of the first things I said to my husband was, now I get to study tarot and oracle. Like, I'm really, And now that I look back on it almost 3 years later, I really think that was a gift from the ancestors. Like, here you go. Mm-hmm. Here's your time. There's no more excuses. You get to do this now. So, yeah.
Carla Jo is saying the ancestors do tend to hit you upside the head when you don't listen. Well, that is very true. Hit you upside the head, invade your dream time. Different ways of getting in touch with us. The other night I had a dream, and in my dream time, it was my ancestors getting in touch with me. And specifically, it was ancestors from the Highlands of Scotland. And I woke up understanding that there was something that I needed to sit with that morning and to be with. And I think that that's part of being a mystic, is to understand that the mystery, as we refer to it, the unseen worlds or the very subtle worlds of the seen, are part of the mystery. And for a mystic, we are drawn to understand more, or to commune more, to communicate more with those mystical places. And so I had to sit with that for a minute in the morning, to make time, to make space, as you were talking about, Donna, making the morning the time when you sit with the presence of the seen and the unseen world, because it's going to influence what you're doing during the course of the day. So for me, if it's working with clients or students, even here in my own sacred space, there's an influence that needs to be paid attention to. And sometimes I think that people negate the mystery of the dream time. And I know for you, working in the dream time, or paying close attention to the work that was done during your dream time, is very important to you. Would you talk about that for a moment, how that part of the mystery influences your work?
Well, it's a huge part of the collage work I do. And yeah, so that it was really kind of born in the dream time. I feel like there's three kinds of dreaming. And this is, we don't talk about this much. When you say dreaming, oh, I work with my dreams, people think, oh, you're sleeping dream, right? You go to sleep at night and you sleep. And if you're lucky, when you wake up, you remember a dream, and that's working with a dream. So that's what I call nighttime dreaming. Then there's daydreaming, where you just, like how many of us were, I wasn't, but a lot of our people are labeled daydreamers. I was like, oh, he's a daydreaming kid. He doesn't pay attention in class, right? So there's that, when you just zone out easily. Artists, we're notorious for being, daydreamer. Because we are dreamers by nature. But then there's the tween time. You can be actively walking around, but then there's this tween time state that comes in. And this comes out of the Celtic tradition, right? Of it's not awake, it's not asleep, it's somewhere in between, and it's highly mystical. Highly mystical. I just had one yesterday morning that nearly knocked my socks off, like nothing, and I was wide awake from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. And this happened in there. I never went back to sleep. I'm so clear about that. But I went in the dream time, was just taken. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But so there's this tween time place. And lots of artists are aware this is where books get birthed, right? You get into this in-between state and you open yourself to guidance. And so what happened to me was I just started collaging. I came back from a training out in California that really opened me up. I was inspired. I was introduced to this whole concept of working with collage. She called it vision seeding. It had a very sort of manifesting focus to it, the way I was first taught it. Many of us remember, right back in when was that? The late 90s or something? The whole concept of collaging to manifest, right? And that was really cool, and I was kind of good at that. But then I came back and I knew like there was more to it, and I just started working, and I would get into these very dreamy in-between states. And what happened for me was I started tapping into past lives. I'm making these collages, and I had this sense of like, this is a part of me. This is a very old part of me. Where is it coming from? It was a little spooky, but it was fascinating. I kept going. So for me, that's the main way that I work and I access that is through collage work. But there are many, many ways for people.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You and I were talking about a phrase, and I'm paraphrasing. You must know what you carry on behalf of your ancestors. And that's something that we heard from our friend Amantha Murphy. When it comes to the gift, so the gift of understanding the dream times, understanding the mysticism or the mystery or the language of the arts, as you do as an artist, or the language of the drum and the rattle. And I think that here in the United States, sometimes we can forget, because maybe our ancestors wanted to forget, coming here to this country to start fresh, that at one time or another, all of our people were indigenous with drums and rattles and understanding the dream times and the dreamscapes, and understanding the unseen world was real, and that the words that we use and the tone of the words that we use, that are inspirations for music and art and language, come from a place that, for lack of a better way of putting it, that our soul, our being is connected to. And we can often think that, well, the only people that have ownership of those dreamscapes or artistic venues or drumming or rattling or singing, chanting, are those that are indigenous to this continent, America, or those that are still indigenous to Ireland or Wales or Scotland or Yugoslavia. So for Americans who understand, we know that our people came from those places and oftentimes left that behind. Are there times, or do you simply, and have you always known perhaps, that your ancestors that live within you, Donna, the Celts that are alive within your blood and your bones, work through you and move through you when you are creating with collage or discerning dreams or drumming? What is that connection to the indigenous aspect of your ancestors that you realize is there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like it's quite recent. I mean, it's probably been, I don't know, 6 years now, but it took a long time to get to this place of being connected back up to my ancestors, and in large part, it came through our mutual friend that you just quoted and mentioned, Amantha Murphy, from studying with her and working with her, you know. And I want to just, that quote you gave, there's a second part to that quote that is really powerful. So she says, you know, once we know what we carry on behalf of our ancestors, we must know what we carry on behalf of our ancestors. She says this over and over when you're with her. It's always woven into some form of her teaching. We must know what we carry on behalf of our ancestors. Because people often don't know. They don't look at this. But once you know what you carry in honor of them, even if we haven't cleared it yet. So what she's getting at here is, you know, we don't want to look because it's the tricky, well, you know, whatever it is. There's alcoholism, you know, in your family. There's mental illness, you know, whatever. There's a break in the line. There was, you know, adoption. You know this well, Dana, right? For a long time, it was a major taboo. You didn't want to talk about that one. There's somebody gave up a baby. Didn't want to go there, right? But even if you haven't cleared that yet, you just have to know what it is and you have to honor it, because that's what gives us power. That's what she taught me. So to be willing to look. So after several times with her, it was some guided journey that I did, and I just went back and looked at it in my notes in preparation for today with everyone, and this jumped out at me that there's a very deep pattern in my line. I think it's both sides of the family, and it's the women. It's often the women. This pattern of secrecy about your gifts. So there was definitely, like, I don't have any oral proof of this, but I have a deep feeling, a deep knowing that my maternal great-grandmother was some kind of seer. That was never told to me. I just pieced together a whole bunch of stories that wouldn't even make sense if we had time for me to tell them to you. But I've been doing this for like a decade now. It's quite clear to me that she was a seer. But you know, you have to. So why was that secret? And then there was secrecy on it, because this is how they stayed safe. You know, my people, they were on the surface, they were Presbyterians, right? So the two often did not mix. But as we know from all kinds of story and folklore, you know, there's usually somebody in a town or a given area. There's always, you know, when all else fails, when all medicine fails, when strange things happen to livestock or the land or a string of bad luck, you ask around enough, you're told, well, it's time you better go see Mrs. So-and-so. She can help you, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I've lost your thread a little bit.
No, this is exactly specific.
Because this really relates to our topic. How do you give voice to it?
Right.
So, you know, this was the gift in preparing for today, that this story jumped out at me, this journey that I did with Amantha, that I have to remember and I have to honor, that there is a deep pattern of secrecy in my line. It's not my fault. It's just what I inherited. It's what I have to work with. It's not an excuse either. Well, my people are secret and they're humble and I'm here to work on that some more. And it's been challenging. It's challenging for me to even write a bio and say, well, these are all the things I study and I know. And my work is shamanic. To say that my work is shamanic, it's hard. It's still hard today. Really, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the work. That's the work for all of us. To find that path and to don't lose sight of it and to just keep chipping away at it best you can.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that you're right about that. There are certain patterns that we see in our bloodline, and sometimes that will be the brick wall for people that don't want to delve any further than the secrecy or the addiction or the sadness. And as I'm saying that, I'm being asked to talk about that for a little bit. The sadness that some carry on behalf of the ancestors who were so sad to leave those countries during times of famine or war or enslavement, etc., that they had to leave the land that they loved in order to find life or to be brought to a life that they were not seeking. And so we can also feel the emotions of our ancestors. And sometimes we don't want to delve into why those emotions exist. Sometimes people can say, well, every time I think of my Irish ancestors, I'm sad. Well, why are you sad? Well, I'm sad that they had to leave during the famine times to come here to the United States, and I don't want to touch that sadness. But in touching that sadness, there's a healing that happens for all of us, I believe. And I do believe in the Native American teaching of that when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations forward and behind us. So the healing, the ancestors, I believe, will often speak to us and through us and give us the courage to feel what they felt, to experience what they felt, or to be the one who breaks the chain of, or the pattern of. Many people who dive into spirituality or mysticism in this country, I believe, are often the ones that are here to change the patterns in their bloodline. Whether it's sadness or the trauma of leaving another country or being encaptured people, brought here. But in doing the deep dive, as you said, is when we come to understand ourselves more and why grandma or great-grandma or great-great-grandma was the way that she was, or looked the way that they did, or told the stories that they did. And in that, the blessings of spirit or the relationship to the spirit of things that happens during our earthly journey really begins to enfold us, if any of this is making sense. And we can start to see that us as healers or working with the roots as we find them here, or the herbs that we find here in this country, not as the indigenous people do, but as we and our ancestors learned to do when they got here, leads me to what we were talking about the other day, when you realize that your apothecary is your teas and your well, it is an apothecary of healing teas. I love that.
Yeah, and it's in my kitchen. Yeah, we were joking because your apothecary is the closet in your office, and has all different tools as well as herbs and roots and things. And mine is my kitchen, a couple different places, my tea, herbal tea collection, then all my herbal medicines that I use live in my kitchen in a cupboard. Yeah. And I feel like there's like a theme here that we're kind of like encircling us with this whole, what we're just talking about now, about the ancestors and not wanting to go there when there's this sadness creeps in, because it has to do with survival, right? Like, I think if we remind ourselves of that, like our people did what they had to do to survive. That's what all people do. Look at what's happening around the globe now. I mean, people are setting off with nothing, with their children in their arms, just to survive, And our people did the same. They got on boats. They crossed the ocean. They had no idea where they were going or what would become of them, to survive. Then they got here. They made a new life. They established new communities, a church, whatever. They joined a church, whatever they had to do. Set up new forms of Protestantism in this country, trying to escape how they were persecuted in the And before you know it, things just come back around. And, the women were hiding. Don't tell the pastor that you healed me with that tea. Okay, I won't say anything. So survival. And I think, like, again, as Amantha says, if we claim that, that's our power. Like, it's okay. My people had to be secret to serve. That's how they knew to be served, to stay safe, to feel safe, to keep the children safe, to keep everybody in the family safe. And sometimes I even find myself, I'll just sort of whisper to them, like, it's okay. It's a different time now. It's a different time now. And, like, everybody's talking. Like, you have to kind of explain to them, like, it's okay. There's lots of books on this now. People take classes. People get,
Great grandma, where are you now? Teach me about those roots that you were working with. Right. Well, and here at the time that your relatives got here and my relatives got here, other than my relatives who were already here in the deep South, those that are Creek and Cherokee, way down in Georgia, my relatives there were already there, but the Scottish and the Irish and the African and the Welsh came over in the 1600s. And I know that I have one great relative who was actually hung in Connecticut in 1643 for witchcraft, being accused of a witch anyway. She was probably a magnificent healer and an herbalist, would be my guess. And so there were those times when we were told, well, we can't say that out loud anymore because look at great-great-great-grandmother Elizabeth was hung by the neck until she was dead. That's what her obituary said. And yet in the time that we're living in, ironically, Donna, the deconstruction of religion in this country is like a wildfire where people are deconstructing religiosity and wondering, well, what did my ancestors do before there was the organized religion? And how do I study that? And am I allowed to claim that because I don't live there anymore? That was a long time ago. Where do I begin to study? And what's the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation? And it really can become mucky.
That's a huge topic. Oh my gosh. It's murky waters, and it's sort of like we're all wading into those right now. Some of us are just jumping right in, which is great. I know it's not my pool, but you're jumping right in, and other of us are kind of wading in. I'm a wader. I've always been a wader. I don't like to dive into cold or uncertain waters. I don't know, Dana.
Well, I'm a jumper inner, as you know. I dive right in when it comes to these things. And as far as mysticism goes, being raised in a Roman Catholic family, well, I remember as a little girl, some of the neighbors telling me that I was a pagan, using the word pagan because I was raised as a Catholic, because Catholics aren't Christians. I mean, I grew up with that. And so there are still people who believe that are saints and yada, yada, yada. And I've got lots of statues of saints, of course. And I work with the angelics in my practice and the saints, etc. So mysticism is built into who I am straight away. But diving into the Celtic parts, diving into the Native American parts of who I am, what I've discovered in my own lifetime And I remember even as a little girl, because I was in a military family, my dad would say, "Hey, Lily, it's good to have you in the chat room with us." My dad would say, if you want to learn something about somebody else's path, Denise Lynn, the best way to do that is to ask them respectfully. So if you want to know about why, for instance, the Jones family from Tennessee have eagle feathers in their home, because they did, go ask Mr. and Mrs. Jones why they have those things. Go ask Mrs. Gordon why she has those particular tapestries. And as it was, Mrs. Gordon was from Korea. So as an 8-year-old girl, I was already learning about the Buddha. And Mr. and Mrs. Jones were kind enough to teach me about eagle and the medicine of the eagle. But my dad always said, always ask with respect. So one thing in diving in or wanting to learn more, I've learned to always ask with respect. And there are certain cultures that consider themselves and their teachings closed. And there are others that say, come on in. And I often think about our Irish friends and Scottish and English and Welsh friends who say, come on in, just be respectful. If your bloodline takes you all the way back to Cornwall or to Wales or to Edinburgh, wherever it happens to be, come on back. This is your home. And even if it isn't where your blood lands you, come on in. The water is fine, but be respectful of the teachings.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. That is key for everything, right? To just honor people wherever they're at on their path and whatever tradition you're looking into, to educate yourself, right? It kind of begins there.
Mm-hmm.
You have an interest, but learn about it and approach it reverently as you open to things. Because I think, so another theme I feel like is kind of, we're circling around us as we're talking about all these things is, when we go in search of different traditions, trying to get in touch with our ancestors or just understand why we're drawn to different things, it's about power. We may not want to admit that, but we're in search of power, right? We're trying to find our power. There's parts of us that are lost, disconnected. We want to reconnect with power. Power, like anything, has a light side and a dark side, right? We can see every day. We just have to turn on the news and we see how power is used not for good, not for the good of the people, But that's true of us too when we go searching to hook back up in our spiritual pursuits. And so, this whole idea of power, like for me, there's the three main ingredients with power. Like, what am I looking for with power? I want this sense of clarity, to be an empowered person that people come to for guidance, whether you're coming to me for a card reading or a workshop or whatever, when I'm in my power, I'm clear. So I've taken care of the body. My mind is clear. I'm calm. I just surrender. Even when you get ready to do something, like I'm an old theater girl, right? And there's always the jitters right before you go on. Doesn't matter how well you know your lines or how excited or how many pages of notes I have today of all kinds of stuff I want to talk about. Little jitters. You acknowledge that, but then you step into this place of clarity and open up, and there's a knowingness of like, I'm going to stay clear. I'm going to stay in my integrity. I'm going to speak the truth. So what I'm saying to you today, you have my word. I'm not bullshit. This is the truth. I'm telling you true stories from my life and my people, right? I'm trying to stay in my integrity. And then you do it with love. You just keep your heart open the best you can. You come from a place of love. That's power. And we all know that. We can feel that when we're with people like that. Mm-hmm. Especially the more sensitive you are, the more you're like, when someone's bullshitting you, you're like, okay, well, that all sounds great. It sounds all good, but, I don't know. So.
Well, I do believe, well, you're right about that. And for me, part of being an American mystic is that oftentimes we're on this path for our own soul's growth. And in the journey of that, of finding that place of balance and peacefulness and empowerment, we can lose friends. We can lose circles of friends. We can lose colleagues. We can lose family members. And even in all of that, there is something within the mystic's soul that says, keep going anyway. Keep going anyway. And we can have a dark night of the soul followed by another dark night of the soul. And there's something within the mystic that says, keep going. Keep going anyway. And I believe that with age, again, going back to something I think is quite unique in the United States, and I could be wrong, I'm certainly not the authority, the global authority on everything, but we get to the point where in knowing who we are, we're not as bothered by the color of our skin or the color of our eyes or the amount of this blood or that blood that is contained within us. Because we grow beyond that at some point, and even in the questioning of, because believe it or not, for those of you that don't live here on Turtle Island, there are people who say to me, well, you can't possibly be Irish. You can't possibly be African. You can't possibly be Native American. And I hear just the opposite of that. And when I was younger, it bothered me because I didn't know, and maybe that's unique to being an adopted person. But as I've gotten older and recently turning 60, I've become unbothered by the thoughts of people who judge others based on skin tone, eye color, origin history, what their story is growing up. I become unbothered by that. Or the ignorance and anger of youth.
Yeah, and the older I get, the more I want to sit at the knee of people who are older than me. You know, there's nothing like hitting midlife to finally realize that the real wisdom is held by the elders, always, in every tribe, in every culture.
I agree with that.
They're the keepers of it. They are the keepers of it. So when someone teaches me based on how her grandmother taught her and says, this is my life's work, I've taught this for 30, 40 years, but I learned it at my granny's knee, I believe her and I honor her. And beyond even that, I know what I know when I'm with someone like that. Amantha is a person like that for me because it's in her energy field. I know how I feel when I sit in her classroom. Her teachings are genuine. They speak to the deep part of my Celtic soul, and she can see on a dime. She will look at you and read you while she's teaching her course for the day, and give you a little reading, and she says something to you and you're scribbling it in your notebook as fast as you can because it's a pearl nugget I've been digging for decades. Oh my gosh, where did that come? She plucks it out of the air. That's a true seer. You have to know that. You have to feel that with your being, and you have to be quiet and be humble. And it's a direct transmission, you know? You're lucky these days you get it in person, but we can't always. Sometimes it's over Zoom or whatever, but it can still come that way.
For sure. And I agree that, and perhaps it's a uniquely American thing, that because we have had to create an amalgam, and the traditions as they are practiced in another country, because we don't have the same plants, we don't have the same animals, we don't have the same herbs, we don't have the same landscapes necessarily as the old countries. We've had to adapt. right? So we adapt. My relatives who are root workers, Southern root workers, would have had to adapt what they knew in Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, Africa, in order to bring what they knew spiritually and at a soul level, extrapolate that to what was available here when they got here to Turtle Island. And then when they met with my relatives who were Creek and Cherokee, well, then it became something even more. So I think here in this country, we are used to the fact that the traditions evolve because they've had to evolve based on location.
Absolutely.
And people coming together.
And the only constant is change, is another way to say that. And as a theater person, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, that's improv, baby. That's of all art, you know? When you can improv, that's improv, right?
Well, the mystic's journey is often improv because the mystic, it's not like we float around in flocks, right? So our own practice is very unique to who we are. You grew up as a Protestant girl. I grew up as a very Catholic girl, an adopted Catholic girl. And no matter the fact that I'm a pipe carrier, that I am also sanctioned to do those ceremonies that I've been taught by holy people out west and my adoptive relatives from out west, those remain with me, and they become partnered with the Catholicism, which becomes partnered with the fact that I'm a Celt, which becomes partnered with the fact that my ancestors, for the greatest portion of the evolution of my bloodline, came from Africa. And I'm not able to pluck certain pieces. They all go together to create my puzzle. And I think that that's okay. I feel that the uniqueness is necessary and more than okay. How do you feel about that?
I totally agree. And when you just said the word puzzle for your puzzle, I heard, saw, felt, yes, that's your collage. That's how I language that. Your collage. You know, what we're all doing here is, there are many names for it. I like to call it, we're on a collage quest. We're trying to piece ourselves back together from who are we at a soul level? And that comes through ancestral lineage. It comes from many of us, it starts in early childhood. So as a very small child, I remember being absolutely obsessed with my 64 box of Crayola crayons because it was all about the color. It's all I want. I just wanted to just sit and color and color. You know, that was the root of it for me. Then as you get older, it becomes other things, and you realize, still color informs me in a huge way, but there's this collage effect that we're multi-layered. We're multi-layered, and we're trying to figure that out. And in the process of doing that, we can't lose sight of the fact of, like, everybody's doing that.
Yes.
In their own way, in their own time, in their own culture, in their own language. And we have to respect that. You know, we have to be so careful to not get on our high horses, especially as spiritual folk. You know, we think, well, I found the one true way. Well, we know how that works out with any given religion, right? Look what's been done in Christ's name. Look what has been done to Christianity. In the name of Christ, no one really understands his teachings anymore.
Right.
You must be so careful, and don't be telling other people they don't know what they know, and their grandmother didn't teach them what she taught. Especially for women. I just have to say, like, oh, my feminist is getting robbed. Like, especially as women, we have been so put down, abused, silenced. We must not do that to other women. We must be very, very careful.
Yes, Ashe. I love that. I keep saying I love that during the show because I'm really digging what we're talking about here and the way that you're expressing it. And, you know, when it does, there are certain practices that are closed. You don't just wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to become a Roman Catholic. No, you go through all of the procedures to become a Roman Catholic. You don't wake up one morning and say, I think that I will be a pipe carrier and, I don't know, pour some sweat lodges. No, there's a certain protocol and training and teachings that you have to be prepared for in order for those things to happen. And so I know that there are certain segments of spirituality, spiritual walks, that you don't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to be that. You can try that, but if you're going to be mindful and respectful, you go to find, just as you said, but more than likely, they find you is the elders.
Right.
The elders will say, I see in you something that I might like to teach you and bring you into. And you sit with that. But if you go knocking on a door that has protocols and procedures before you can become, there is a reason for that. And that also needs to be respected when we're talking about, finding a spiritual path that works for us. Most often, as Carla Jo was also alluding to, our ancestors find us and they find for us the teachers that will be put upon our path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All about respect. So respecting the closed doors.
All about respect. And also, yeah. And even respecting that, people who are younger, they are where they're at, right? Mm-hmm. The folly of, what is it?
The folly of youth.
The folly of youth, that's part of it too. I was a big know-it-all in my 20s and 30s for sure.
I was at a ceremony out on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with my adoptive relatives, and it was after a sweat ceremony, a healing ceremony with a young medicine man. Wichasha Wakan or Wakan Wichasha out there. And during the course of his ceremony inside the Inipi, he made some derogatory comments about some of the folks in the sweat lodge who were Caucasian. And later, after the sweat lodge, when we were all sitting around, he started up with that again. And my eldest sister, Della, Bad Wound, she looked at me and she looked at him and she grabbed my hand and she said, I want you to listen to what I'm going to tell you. He's very, very young. He doesn't know what he is saying because he doesn't have enough miles in his life to understand what the older ones know. So please let everyone know not to be offended. It is his youth and inexperience that is speaking. Not the authority of somebody who is being taught to pour the lodges, et cetera, et cetera. And it really struck me in that moment that she was so right. And I've met people in many streams who know just enough that they feel they have ultimate authority and understanding, and they don't. So as we get older, we tend to let those things roll off. But that's not to say sometimes they need to be corrected, because she did look at him then as his elder and say, one day you will understand how hurtful you're being and how incorrect your teaching right now is. And his eyes got really big because this was coming from a very respected elder. Right. Yeah. So along the way, we learn to respect.
That reminds me of a time with my own mother.
Along the line, we learn to take. It reminds me of when a dog takes its puppy by the scruff of the neck. Right? Sometimes we get that from our elders along the pathway to finding who we are. An elder will correct us, sometimes in a stern way or in a more obtuse way as we're going along.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the wisdom to know when and how to do that, with others. Mm-hmm. Because we all have those opportunities. It can even just be day to day, your day to day life. You're having tea with your girlfriends, and someone makes a, racial comment or whatever, and you just have the integrity to say, oh, come on, that's not That's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of it.
It is. We're all learning. Carla Joe is saying, on my path, there are those who know just enough to be dangerous. Oh, that's a whole, we might have to do a show on that. Knowing just enough to be dangerous. Amen to that.
Because people say to me when I spout off about astrology, which I often love to do, and I feel like I know a thimbleful, but I'm fascinated by astrology. I just haven't gotten around to studying that one. And some people ask me, oh, tell me. And I said, listen, I know just enough about astrology to be dangerous, so just take it all with a grain of salt. I know my sun, moon, and rising. Don't ask me the rest of the details of my chart of how many planets are in this house. I can't tell you offhand.
And you're willing to say that I don't know. And others are not always so willing to say, I don't know. So there are definitely...
But I have respect for it.
Yes.
So that's, you have to get, astrology is, you could study astrology your whole life, just like you could study the tarot your whole life, and just begin to step into some form of mastery, So, yeah, just have to remember that.
We'll have to have another discussion even about the commercialism at some point of mysticism and all of that kind of thing, the materialism and all of that.
What was that? You're breaking up a little for me.
Sometime coming back with one another to talk about the materialization of spirituality and mysticism and all of that kind of a thing. That's a subject in and of itself. Yeah. So as we're wrapping up today, number one, thank you, Donna. This has been outstanding. For those of you that would like to hear more of what Donna has to say and what she shares, she has her own YouTube channel, and I love it. I feel like I'm having a cup of tea when I watch Donna's productions on YouTube. Donna, what is the name of your channel, please?
It's Artists, plural, and Oracles.
Artists and Oracles. Go on, take a look, subscribe to her channel. And once again, Donna, where can people learn more about your work and order a copy of your book? By the way, everybody, I am a huge advocate and fan of Collage Quest. I could do a whole show just on the effects of it. But if you'd like to learn more about Donna's work with collage and Collage Quest, Donna, where do they find more?
Healinginteriors.com.
Healinginteriors.com. With that, everybody, thank you for joining us on The American Mystic. Donna, thank you for being my friend and ally and co-mystic colleague. And all of you, wherever you...
I'm so glad our paths crossed way back when.
Me too. I'm so grateful for that. Wherever you happen to be around Grandmother Earth, this is the season of light, and in whatever tradition you celebrate the light, I honor your path and I honor your light. Blessings be, everyone. Have a spectacular day and holy season.